the Prince and the Pauper starts to fade away into the distance. But I've read it like about 2 or 3 years ago. I read it, and it was like a Norton critical edition with all the illustrations. And that kind of is what got me into discovering the Oxford Mark Twain's, the original editions, and all the illustrations. That was one of the key motivations for me in finding that book. So thank you or no thank you, Prince and Pauper, the other edition I had, but I read you again in sequence now after Tom Sawyer, his first novel, or his first solo novel of fiction. It's a lot of qualifiers, but it is Prince and the Pauper. What can I say? It's probably a story. I'm not clear. I should have looked this up beforehand, but I'm not going to now. But was The Prince and the Pauper a story known like as a fairy tale or a folk tale? I feel like it must have been, right? Couldn't have just been created. But I don't know, because it's like one of those things. Mark Twain is well before my time. So maybe in that time, since it's published in the, when is it, 1870 something, 6, maybe it's just it's been so internalized into our consciousness and as a story, a myth that is indelible from human history that we don't even think of it as having a beginning. But maybe, I don't know, I'll look that up at some point, maybe not. So the story, though, I think a lot of you know, there's been Disney versions and other cartoon versions where a prince and pauper sort of have a Freaky Friday moment where they switch places. And is that what happened in Freaky Friday? I don't even remember. Was that the parent one? Or is that the Parent Trap? I don't know. But basically, two people change positions, and the sleight of hand involved is that they look exactly or near exactly alike, so that even the people that know them well cannot tell them apart, that's quite a leap, right? I think any basis for this, Edward VI, whoever it is, the prince, son of Henry VIII, who dies in his youth. Edward VI, not Henry VIII. Youth, I want to say older than youth, maybe like 18. How old was he? However much he has. Edward VI. I don't think there's any basis for the fact behind. I'm never going to finish this sentence. So this is fiction. That's a shorter version of what I'm trying to say. Mark Twain or somebody created this story. Maybe Mark Twain is the one who created these specifics of choosing Edward VI, choosing all these specific details about what happened, the other characters he throws in and tacks on. I feel like I was going somewhere with a sentence, but I'm just going to carry on. So the illustrations I haven't talked about. Let's do that. They are very consistent, much more, I would say, than almost any other Twain book I've read, certainly more than Tom Sawyer, although I would say they have a lot less personality than Tom Sawyer. This feels very plotted out. Like, it has some typical Twainian, is that a word? Twainish excursions or digressions, and sometimes he just gets a little too dry talking about state policy and history in a way that is, I know you're Mark Twain, I know you can tell a better story than this. He just feels a little constrained by the plot. It didn't feel that way in Tom Sawyer. I think Tom Sawyer is a better book. It's shorter, it's more, the characters are stronger. But these characters are good, but they just don't have as much range. Yeah, that's a pretty good point. Tom Sawyer, he's a very wide-ranging character. He does good things, he does bad things. Has debates inside himself about what's right and wrong, and seems to generally can't care about what is right and wrong. Whereas these two characters are they feel a little more selfish and a little more childish, and that they're just trying to get back to their previous lives and to maybe help their family a little. And he cares about when Henry VIII dies, but still, it's just not the same. It feels a little like these characters are a little more egocentric, and that gives them a clearly defined desire to get back to their old lives or to make things right. But there's just not as much, I don't want to say there's not as much at stake because it's like a kingdom, but it just doesn't feel, I mean, it feels like the kingdom would have prospered under either of the boys. So what does it really matter if they get restored to their place? It's addressing, obviously, the social economic issue of, why should this boy be raised in poverty while this boy is raised in opulence when they are more or less indistinguishable, and what gives somebody a right to all this power if they aren't necessarily a better or a good person? They make him look, or Twain makes him look like he's a very admirable boy and trying to do right, but that's just a roll of the dice. What if some other more snotty, selfish boy had gone to the throne, which has happened many times? And one of the characters, I forget his name now, the guy that's trying to get his own situation remedied. He was away at the wars or something, and he's coming home to this castle. That felt like very Three Musketeers-y, Count of Monte Cristo-y. And I think Twain, he was certainly a reader, and he'd been reading all these chivalry tales and histories of England and things like that. And in his next book, he's going to criticize when that's taken to an extreme, and things like Ivanhoe. He really rails on Sir Walter Scott, who I haven't read, so I can't really say either way how I feel about it. But Twain is inserting like a social conscience in this book that I don't think, it's definitely different from his earlier books. He is more, maybe something like reading Uncle Tom's Cabin, or just the end of the Civil War, which is at this point, even when he got started, the Civil War was over, but at this point it's becoming history, it's becoming a pillar in people's minds, and Twain and the rest of the country is forming a consensus about what the war meant, why it was fought, and there were reasons at the time given, and both sides may have believed those reasons to various degrees, but by the time Twain is writing this, it's the cause, it's become history, literally, and it has to be explained to every generation so that they can understand it and gain a story from it. That's sort of how history is changing, is that the future, we're always moving towards the future, and we're changing our conception of things so that we have to reevaluate history. Twain took a break in the middle of this somewhere, and he went to finish A Tramp Abroad or go to Europe and write that book. But this book feels uneven. It's not as much as The Gilded Age. It does have a more consistent voice than that, but it just feels like sometimes he's not writing as smoothly, and sometimes I could just really get into the flow of the book, but sometimes it just felt very stiff. So this is a Mark Twain still in transition. After I read, what's the book I'm reading now called? Life on the Mississippi, which has some really dry parts too, especially in the beginning, but I'll talk about that later. But after that, I'm going to read Huckleberry Finn, and I'm really excited about that. That's like the great American novel, and I've read it before, or maybe I've just audiobooked it, I don't remember, but I do know it certainly, and it's I'm excited whether it's going to hold up, or if it's just going to be, if I'm going to criticize it the way I've critiqued and torn apart a lot of the other books that Mark Twain has done up to this point, or is this really a transition into his best book? I don't know. I don't really remember at this point, so we'll see. I'm excited. I'll get to that soon.